Yeah, I confess, Father, I confess, 'cause I've been living wrong.
Hey, what's up? It's TJ. I'm back. 2019 riding season. I haven't really been able to get out as much as I wanted to. Just short of noon here. It's supposed to be about 75 today outside of Chicago. So I figured I'd come for a rip. Say hello for the first time in 2019. I don't know if you can tell right away, but so it's a little bit different in the cockpit here. At the black face gauges, those were the ones that debuted in like 15 for the CVO. This is a 15, so I figured I'd stick with that theme and get those. I like the way that they're black, but they still have the chrome ring around them. Gives them a nice accent, especially with the color theme I was going with. So we were on a trip last year and we got stuck in the rain, and we were in the rain. When I say stuck in the rain, we were in rain for about 6.5 to 7 hours. Well, my gauges went out. Because I didn't have the speedo and the tach, I lost my LCD display for my mileage indicator, and I also lost my cruise control. Now this was on a trip that was about 8 hours away from home. Not fun, especially when you're out on the road and you usually don't want to be caught speeding outside of the state you live in. A very shitty situation to be put in. Thank you, Harley, for that one. So what I actually am going to do, behind here is where the plug is, behind this LCD readout, the mileage indicator. There's a pigtail that plugs to these two gauges that feeds the module inside of here. And what I want to do is I'm going to drill a little weep hole right behind it, so that if any water settles on the gauge face here and bleeds down onto the gauge, so there is plastic, kind of like a sealer. It's almost like a Reynolds wrap right behind the glass on these gauges, but sometimes it'll still leak past that. Or if it gets into the housing, it's just going to drip behind the plastic face and then drip into the plastic housing. So the water will settle to whichever side your handlebar is tilted. If you have it to the right, it'll settle on this gauge. If you have it to the left, it'll settle here. Where that plug, that pigtail, is right behind this tach. So of course, or the mile per hour gauge right behind the LCD display. So of course, if you have your bike parked regularly, you usually turn your bars to the left. It's going to settle right behind that little connector and behind the LCD face. So there was a big burn, and I'll see if I can put a picture of it up. There was a big burn on the circuit board right behind that face. And that burn, ultimately, it didn't cause the whole thing to go out, because I had to separate it and clean it all up, hit it with electrical cleaner, wire brush it, make sure all the corrosion that was on it got off. But ultimately that burn is what shorted the board and turned out not only my cruise control, because it's on the same module, but my indicators, these two indicators here. So the top two, the volts and the fuel, were fine, but I didn't have any, I couldn't tell how fast I was going. I couldn't tell which gear I was in. Obviously that's creature comfort, but I couldn't tell what my mile per hour was. I had to do everything by feel. Now I could have just, because I have this computer, the Power Vision, I could have just re-gauged it so that I put my tach and my speedometer back up. But it was just real inconvenient, and it sucked because I couldn't use cruise control. So of course I was on my throttle coming back, and we burned back in one day. So it was about a 9-hour trip, and it's a whole lot more convenient to have a touring bike that has cruise control that functions. So Harley, if you're taking note, fix that shit, please. Ridiculous. It's just a stupid thing to have happen because you get caught in the rain on a motorcycle when everything else was perfectly fine. Now it came back. I was able to revive those gauges. I still have them. I might send them off just to maybe do like a custom gauge face or something to them, and then keep them as a second set of gauges. It took about 2 days of rebuilding. I had to clean everything up, make sure I used dielectric grease on the back of the board, I had to use electronic connector to make sure everything had dissolved the water, the moisture that was behind that gauge face. But I only was able to do it because I was comfortable in my ability to work on electronics and to work on the circuit board. I can see, obviously, if people are not inclined to do that, or they don't have the fucking time, they're just gonna run out and buy a set of gauges. And even this specific gauge, they wanted $400 or something like that from Harley to replace the tach and the speed, just these two, not the full 4. So it's a pain in the ass when you think about you're gonna have to throw away $400 because Harley couldn't get that shit figured out. And the Street Glides, of course, don't have that issue because their gauges are in the fairing. So who knows? Maybe in the future they'll figure that one out. Maybe not. Maybe people will just be paying for $400 gauges every time their shit goes out. So that's it. I'm off my soapbox.